Hello, friends. Hello, everybody. I'm LD Madeira, and you are listening to the Improv and Magic Podcast, the only podcast that celebrates improvisers and magicians. My friends, what a show we have today. I am thrilled to have as my guest one of the biggest names in magic today, Joshua J. Yes, the Joshua J., worldwide performer, author, and co-founder of Vanishing Inc. I learned so much from this conversation, and I hope you will too. So, wherever you are, get comfy and enjoy my conversation with Joshua J. My friends, I am incredibly honored to welcome here on Improv and Magic. He's a magician like no other. He's the one and only Joshua J. Hey, Joshua, so good to have you here.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for making the time.
You know, you are talking to me with a very enthusiastic attitude, and you sound very pleasant and energized, but I can't help but wonder, how are you just not completely exhausted right now? Because you are constantly traveling from one city, from one country to the next, shows and lectures. How do you manage to keep yourself energized and going?
I guess the two answers to that question are I am exhausted. I am always exhausted. But also, I work very hard and I relax very hard. So what happens is I know if there's a period I'm kind of in a rest period now, even though I am leaving tomorrow for a small show thing. I don't leave until the 30th of this month. So I have another 10 days or so before I have to really gear up. But I realized when that 10 days is up, I will be on the go for 45 days without a day off. I'm doing a month-long run in Chicago. We've got the retreat in Mexico. I've got 3 private shows in between all those other things in different countries. So what I do is I just psych myself into it, and I know it's coming. So I rest hard and then I work hard. And I guess that's the secret.
Was it tough for you to adjust in the beginning of having to do so much traveling?
No, quite the opposite. I didn't travel. My family didn't travel a ton as a kid, certainly not internationally. And I was so curious about the world. I wanted to see all the amazing places. So in the beginning, I realized that magic could be a great doorway to see those places. So I would say to you for the first 10 years of my career, I was motivated to get to everywhere I could, regardless of if there was a fee or if I'd break even or if not. And I just wanted to get everywhere. And to a degree, I've just never slowed down. I'm still so up for an adventure. I mean, I just took an international show for very low money at the expense of a much better situation here in the States because I'd just never been to where that show is and I wanted to see it. So this is happening all the time.
I love that the adventure never ends.
Oh, no. I mean, look, I look at my colleagues who don't explore the world around them as the weird ones, even though I'm the weird one. I mean, it's so crazy to me that, let's say, okay, you're going to do a convention I did last year in Bulgaria. What an amazing country, filled with interesting things to see. And of all the other international performers, not a single one came early or stayed late to see it. They were like, well, it's just a gig. I'm just going to fly in, do the show, and leave. How can you leave a place like Bulgaria without looking around? Italy, we just all got back from FISM. I got there early. I stayed late. I wanted to see, Torino, which I've been to before, and other places. And so many people, they fly in, they fly out. They got tunnel vision for magic. And that's just very odd to me. But not everybody likes adventures.
So you definitely have the ability to stop and smell the roses, so to speak.
You have to. I mean, I couldn't do what I do if I didn't enjoy, getting to see the world that magic opens up for you.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about you, Joshua. So where did you grow up and what was growing up like for you?
I had a great childhood. I grew up in Canton, Ohio. Great parents, divorced parents, so I split my time evenly between mom's house and dad's house, both remarried. Um, Sadly, all parents and my mom is alive, but my dad passed away. Stepdad just passed away recently, so that's kind of this the bittersweet ending to that. But let me see. I grew up in Akron, Ohio. Loved growing up a little bit isolated. I had a great magic club in town. I would see every lecture and show that came through northeastern Ohio, but for the most part I didn't learn from a teacher. I learned by creating my own, at first terrible, and then hopefully later on less terrible tricks. I was isolated. I'm an only child, so I stayed in my room a lot and read every magic book cover to cover, backwards and forwards, tried every trick in it, and slowly started to come up with my own stuff. And I learned pretty early on that creating my own material was what really scratched the itch for me. That to me was the height of artistic magic, and the people I looked up to were so clever above everything else in magic that they could come up with those things, and I wanted to be those people and I wanted to emulate those people.
I myself am also an only child, and I've had the opportunity to speak to other guests here who are also only children. And we've talked about the whole concept of when you're an only child, you kind of end up creating your own world, which is usually in your own
Yeah.
bedroom. Does that sound like
Yeah.
something similar to what you went through?
Completely. Completely. And I was an only child of divorced parents where I would go back and forth and I was the only one in each house that was a kid. And so, yeah, makes complete sense. And when you have to completely occupy your own time, and I just wasn't a kid who played with neighborhood kids very much. So when you're completely occupying your own time, you have to learn how to entertain yourself. And magic is a dream for entertaining yourself. So, you turn you turn a negative into a positive, and magic becomes this all engrossing thing that you can't get enough of.
Well, what was it that got you interested in magic?
So my father was a dentist by trade, but he loved magic, and we did it together. We went to a local magic club, and we tried other things. We tried Boy Scouts, and I did T-ball, and I did sports as a kid. But when I saw him do a magic trick, when he taught me my first magic trick, something clicked. It was just fascinating to me. I mean, truly sounds corny and trite to say it, but it was as fascinating to me then as it is now. I'm just engrossed by magic. I think it's so wonderful. I just went and saw a show here in Vegas, a non-magic variety review show with acrobatics and comedy, and it was really good. It was a really good show. But I just thought to myself the whole time, as great as this is, who knows if it's because I've thought, eat, lived, and breathed magic the last 30 years of my life, but I would just so much rather be watching magic than anything else. And, I know people feel that way about musicals, people feel that way about basketball, but for me, magic really is my calling. It's a passion. It's even more than a passion, it's like an impulse. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I can't not do it. If I should, for some weird reason, go a whole day without a deck of cards in my hand to drill something or work on something, I feel weird.
There are a lot of people who, like you, get into magic when they're very young. There's also some people who kind of get into it later. Do you think, had you gotten into it later, like maybe in your teens or as an adult, you would still have the same love for magic then as you do now?
I mean, I do. Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, I hear magicians say sometimes, "Oh, I'm suffering burnout. I have burnout. I have burnout." I don't think I've ever had burnout. Not even. I mean, there have been months where I haven't had so much as a day off. When I was doing Six Impossible Things, I was doing Wednesday to Sunday, 2 shows a night, and matinees included on the weekends. And then that Monday, Tuesday, I was always doing private stuff that I would get from those. So it was 7 days a week, and there were TV appearances and many other things. And even when it was that hectic, or when I'd go on a 3-month lecture tour where you're lecturing every night, never once did I feel like it's too much. I'm sick of this. I would feel, of course, like I'm tired. I could use a break. But I mean, it's always funny to me that I get home from these big sweeping tours and the first thing I do is start working on new stuff. That's just like, that's my impulse. I get very sick sometimes of the business side of it or the people within magic, but never magic itself. It's like this perfect thing that I never tired of.
Many of us who at a young age decide to get into magic have that all too familiar talk with their parents, where you tell them, I want to be a magician, and they say, you need a real job. Did you ever go through anything similar with your parents?
No, not at all. I can say that they were very supportive. I mean, my father had a very different sort of life situation in that his parents died very young. So he felt very compelled to get out of school and start earning money and do the thing that everybody else does, have a family young and just get started on it. And because of that, like, I don't think he loved what he did. And, it's very hard at, let's say, 40 years old to just sort of go, I want to make a career change. So he did it. And he did it very well. And he did it with a smile on his face. But he really stressed to a large degree, find something you really love and make a living from that. And I think that can only usually come from a place of someone who maybe didn't take that advice themselves. And so it was always in my home from my mom and my dad a question of like, find something you love and you'll find a way to make it work somehow. And I was very lucky because I won some awards at a young age. I published a book very young, probably too young. And I had enough, let's call it momentum, to start traveling the world and make a little name within the magic community. And that made it easier to stage shows and start my professional work.
Last season, I had the opportunity to speak with your best friend, Andy Gladwin, and he gave me this great visual about the first time the two of you met, which was on Lance Burton's shows, and the both of you were wearing brightly colored suits. Do you remember that time where you first met Andy?
Oh, of course I do. Yeah, you don't forget a monumental moment like that in your life. I mean, we didn't know it then. But the crazy thing about there are many crazy things surrounding that Lance Burton special. So let me take you through it. Like, people have to remember that at that moment, Lance was the guy. I mean, Copperfield was always the guy. I think this is pre David Blaine. But, Lance was Mr. Vegas, but he had television specials and they were a big deal. And so we should never forget that in the height of Lance's fame, he chose to spotlight and help young magicians. He ran a young magicians like mini convention at what was called the Desert Magic Seminar, and he used to put young magicians in his television special. Nobody since has done that to that degree. So we all owe Lance a debt of gratitude for putting others before himself. That's a really big deal.
And I believe he's still doing that. He's still providing a lot of support for young magicians, isn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think that they just handed over the reins after many years for the IBM. He was running his conference, so now somebody else is taking it over. But yeah, no, he's a great champion of young magicians. And what's weird was I was just ramping up I was only 17, but I was already starting to travel for magic. And I ran into Lance Burton in an airport. I mean, that is like the chances of that happening. I run into people at airports because I'm always at airports, but it's so rare. And to see Lance Burton randomly at an airport and have him look at me and go, "Oh, Josh, we just sent you a letter." I mean, this is how long it was. They told me by snail mail that my submission had been, accepted. And he goes, "We just sent you a letter. You're going to be on my next television special." What? So that was a great moment. And yes, there were a lot of wonderful young magicians that I met for the first time there. And that included Andy Gladwin, who, was from the UK and did an extremely cute and awesomely terrible, I think it was an Aerobasket illusion. And we stayed in touch from there. And, years and years later, we stayed in touch online. I was lecturing in the UK, and I met up with Andy, who at that time had a job in the corporate sphere, in the tech sphere. And I said, "Can we get together? Can we hang out? Can I stay with you?" And we sort of birthed the idea of a partnership in Vanishing Ink, and the rest is history.
Do you still have that suit, by the way?
You know, I think I do somewhere, somehow, and it probably almost fits me now. The 90s were a time for big, bulky, overgrown suits, so that fit.
Yes, they were. So, talk about all the awards that you've received. One that I'm particularly interested in is in January 2016, you received a Guinness World Record, and it was for being able to find 21 cards in 1 minute. How was that experience for you?
Well, I thought you were gonna ask about my Merlin Award, thinking of prestigious awards.
That's on the list, don't worry.
Okay, I'm just kidding you. Yeah, I'm happy to talk frankly about that. That was entirely, it's so rare when things work out in the plan you orchestrate. And I knew that what I wanted out of that was two things. I wanted to say I won a Guinness World Record because I think that that's the rare accolade that inspires curiosity. If you just are introduced and it's like Joshua Jay's been on the Tonight Show, he's done this, he's won this, he's performed here, he sold this out, he sold that out. That's like an okay, nice little brags, right? Little ways of showing your credibility to an audience. But holds a Guinness World Record for card tricks. Anytime anybody hears that in a bio or something, they always ask about it. And I knew that that's exactly what you want. You want people curious about the things you do. And I wanted to create a closer of my show. And I knew even then what the ingredients were going to be. I wanted to do a beat the clock scenario that is such a great way to add drama. For those of us who don't do illusions where we're going to escape from ropes that are on fire with daggers beneath us, if you don't do that kind of escape type stuff, you have to find other ways to increase the drama. And one of the greatest ways I've found is a beat the clock scenario where you're racing against time. And then on top of that, if you can add in like a showpiece that's unique to you, a sort of signature piece for an ending where you can tell a story, all the better. And I had just been through this injury with my hand. And so I set out to create a Guinness World Record trick. And my plan all along, I knew that I needed to find so many cards to set the record. I forget what it was initially, but I think it was 20 some cards that I had to do, which 20 some cards in 60 seconds is so unentertaining. You are just basically pushing cards out of a deck. That's all you can do. However, I thought, correctly, I think, once I set the record, I can make up any routine for it that I want. So the routine to this day that ends my show is not 26 cards. I say it's the world record routine. I say that I'm the Guinness World Record holder. All that's true. But then the routine that I do is a very breezy 10 cards, which feels great. It still feels, by the way, really rushed. There's a beat the buzzer ending, but I've done this at a halftime show for the Milwaukee Bucks in front of 20,000 people. I've done this, on stage at Carnegie Hall and the Kennedy Center. I've done this everywhere, and it plays big, it plays intimate. It does everything I wanted in a closer. And I hoped that would happen, and that's why I set out to do that one.
You briefly mentioned your hand injury, and I did hear the story about that. And I feel like going through that experience where you're not sure if you're going to be able to move your hand or not, and whether or not you have to start doing magic one-handed, I think that's a very interesting part of your story because I think it speaks to your determination and your perseverance. Is that something that is kind of a big part of who you are, being able to persevere no matter what?
Well, that's very kind of you to say. It's interesting. The narratives in your life really only come into focus when they're over, and it becomes about how you frame them. I look back, it's like part of my own ancient history now that I went through this. I play sports, I lift weights, I can go about my life on my My hand is not a handicap in any way, thank God. Um, but I can tell you going through it, you're not sitting there going like, "Well, I'll use this in my act. I'll talk about this. This is a defining moment for me." You're sitting there stressed as hell thinking, "I may not use my hand again." And, the part that even I forget sometimes is like, there's nobody on the front end of these types of injuries, at least there wasn't for me, telling me it's all going to be fine. From the moment I had this injury, for those who don't know, I was water skiing and collided with a metal buoy at 55 miles an hour. And I had 3 surgeries on my left hand. I had a plate, 5 screws, 2 pins put in. I basically spent 6 months on my back. I was all banged up. It was a very serious injury. Um, the first thing I wanted to know was like, I don't care what it takes. I don't care how many surgeries. I don't care how long the therapy is. Just tell me I'm going to be able to use my hand again. And these surgeons, they really don't know. And they're like, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that at all. We're going to have to see how the first one goes and then what's left for the second one. Okay, fine. But tell me this. The feeling will come back, right? I will have feeling in my fingertips. No, some do and some don't. It's going to be a touch and go. I don't think it'll be the same. I can tell you that. But what does that mean? It's not going to be the same. The uncertainty overtakes you. And then, of course, these surgeries, you have to recuperate from one, and then you have the next one. You get multiple opinions. And these are really, really rare procedures that were done on my wrist. The specialists, and they're moving nerves around, and they're basically reconstructing my wrist across several operations. And like the whole time you're waiting around, yeah, I can remember thinking to myself, I'm going to have to learn to do things like tie my shoe with one hand or eat with the other hand because I was left-handed. I'm going to have to learn to like put on a shirt and button my buttons with one hand, like to bathe myself. I was preparing like I wasn't going to have much use of my left hand ever again. And then, the great miracle is it all came back. And what's funny is after the surgery, they were very confident that I could get mobility back, but they were not confident that I'd get feeling back. And my God, like to hold a deck of cards and dealing grip in your left hand and not be able to feel, your ring and little fingers, it's just, it's the worst thing in the world. I was coming up with all these alternatives of other things, and, it eventually came back. The one other thing I would tell you, speaking of turning negatives into positives, is during that period when I thought I was only going to be able to use one hand, I really took it seriously and I started to create magic for the first time. If you look at my work before that was pure sleight of hand. I really didn't use a lot of gimmicks, but I switched at that point, favoring a lot of subtlety, a lot of clever technique, a lot of, different principles that didn't rely on manual dexterity, for the reason that I thought I wouldn't be able to do it anymore. And that, learning to develop those mental muscles and sort of develop my toolbox into a more well-rounded way really helped a ton.
What I love about watching you perform, and even now as I hear you talk, there definitely is a great emphasis on storytelling in your act. For you, how important is creating a story in magic?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, this is something that I've become very passionate about. I think magic is a wonderful way to communicate story. And somewhere along the lines, I feel like people started to look to me as some kind of a guru in this area. It's not the case at all. I don't view myself that way. I have a very sort of muted relationship to stories and magic. I tell some. If you know of my work, you know that in Trojan Deck, I tell the story of how my parents met, which is a true story. So two decks are shuffled. I shuffle one, a participant shuffles one. And as they shuffle, I tell the story of how my parents met. And there's another trick called Out of Sight, which is another true story about doing magic for a blind person. It's what would look like if you did magic that you didn't have to see, magic that you could feel. And I've told stories about my hand injury. I have a trick called Balance that tells the story of doing magic for people in prisons. So I feel like magicians have this idea that I'm the storytelling guy. Nothing really could be further from the truth. I mean, for all the tricks I have with stories, I have 10 times more that have no narrative line going in them. And I feel quite strongly that when you tell stories with magic, the stories have to serve the magic. If they detract or don't add, they have to come out. And the most important one, that's the hardest one to nail, is you never want to use specifics in magic, because as soon as you make a rule, somebody will show you how they can break it, which is great. But I really offer the advice as a rule. You get about 3 to 4 sentences. That's about how long you get before you have to do something or have some kind of magic effect. When you go longer than 3 or 4 sentences, 5 or 6 sentences at the max, your story is almost certainly going to start to detract.
People who are regular listeners of this podcast will know that I'm very fond of asking this question, especially to magicians. There are magicians who, when they perform, they are 100% authentically themselves. And then there are other magicians who decide they're going to portray someone completely different from themselves. And then there are some who kind of meet in the middle somewhere. When you perform, how much of Joshua J do we really see?
Yeah, it's a great question. Guys have spoken on this before, and it's a fascinating conversation. Your observation is exactly right. There are success stories on all sides of it. I would say to you that I am constantly striving to be the best and most theatrical version of myself on stage. I want to be honest. I want to be authentic, but you know how it is. Authentic you is like today. It's like Wednesday afternoon, me in my house alone doing a bunch of work and writing and reading and getting stuff done. That's not really interesting on a stage. You want to put the most interesting version of yourself, the part that would fascinate people, and the part that, the parts that hopefully would interest them. And you get to spend so little time with your audiences. You're obliged to show them a good time and be as interesting as possible. I've never had any desire to be somebody else or make up stories about myself or play a character. I don't begrudge anybody else. I just saw Lucy Darling's show here in Vegas, and she plays a character that couldn't be further from Carissa Hendricks, and it was marvelous. And so, it's just, isn't it wonderful that we come in a craft that there is no one prescriptive way to be successful, so to speak?
Yeah, it's like the old Eugene Berger quote, "The House of Magic has many rooms."
Yeah.
So you are always constantly not just performing, but inventing magic and inventing methods. At what point do you feel like this trick is done and it's ready for an audience?
Oh, yeah, that's really hard to know. I can tell you that the process for me, as I do it more and more, is I actually try and put it in front of an audience earlier, because what I'm learning is guesswork, even as you get better, only gets you so far. And I can guess and guess and guess and guess and guess. But, whether I spend 3 or 4 hours on an idea or 100 hours on an idea, and I've done both, you really don't know anything until you put it in front of an audience. And there will always be blind spots like, wow, I was so worried about the force, and the force flew by no problem. But I was so sure this ending would crush, and the ending's the worst part. There is just, it never goes exactly to plan, at least not for me. So anymore, I'm like really eager to put it in front of an audience, because I just want to figure out the weak spots and start improving on those.
After you've finished creating a piece for your show, are you able to be satisfied where it is? Or are you the type that will say, you know what, I bet I could change something else? Do you like to continue to tinker away at pieces that you've invented?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question you've asked. And, it's a softball question. So, you're giving me a layup to say what I should say, which is, look, we are gardeners. You never stop improving. You can always try and improve a trick. But I also know very few magicians who through their actions, not their words, would say contrary to that. And that, I'm as guilty as anybody else. When a trick starts really working and feeling great, you don't change much about it. And there are tricks in my show that haven't changed so much as a word in years because they're doing what I feel they need to be doing. And I've put every second under a microscope and it seems like it's working pretty well. Now, the perfectionist in me, if I really sit and think about it, I'd like to change that. I'd like to brush this up. I wish I could build this a little differently and it looked a little better. Whatever it is, we shouldn't ever stop working. But that's just not, that's probably not the honest answer that we should be more honest about, I guess.
You've also had many television appearances. Have you found that there were times where you kind of had to adjust your performance because you're moving from a live audience to the TV camera?
Yeah, almost all the time. The only, I will say this, and I'm really grateful to Gay Blackstone and Masters of Illusion. That's the only TV show where they let me do exactly what I want the way I want it. And a lot of people pick on that show because, it, by the very nature of it, they film like whatever it is, 20 some episodes in 4 days. They get a ton of talented performers in. You have very limited time with all the cameras and all the crew. And so, it's a bit of a factory. You're in, you do your thing, you get out. If something messes up, you do another take, you get in, you get out. And the audience is, a studio audience. And it's not a David Blaine special in how it's produced. Let's say it that way. But what I hope people would consider hand in hand with it is they give the performers a lot of latitude, which I appreciate. When I've done Fallon and Corden and the Today Show and some of these really big, high profile things, we magicians, we are there in the worst spot to fill in probably for a celebrity who canceled. Our time is variable depending on how long the monologue went or what's left over. We have no control over things. That comes with star power. I mean, I'm sure when David Blaine goes on The Tonight Show, he gets editing rights, but I certainly didn't. So you have to be great, and you have to be great when the deck is stacked so far against you. And it's really hard. It's really, really hard. I mean, Six Impossible Things kind of was a moment for me where all of a sudden these producers were coming to me, asking me to be on these shows. And that was such an honor. It was also such a stress that I do not miss those moments. They were, I didn't sleep for weeks leading up to some of those big TV appearances because, they're live and you don't get a retake and you're doing material where the hosts might try and throw you under a bus to be funny. And you have to live with the result. So
whether it's live or on television, the audience, of course, is always the X factor because you never really know what you're going to get. How do you manage to kind of keep yourself prepared and be ready for what different types of audiences bring you?
Oh, I mean, experience. You can't, experience is the only teacher in that regard. And that's why these days, I don't view a trick, especially a new piece, as anything until it's gone through 50 or 100 performances. Then I start to understand what's happening with it.
We've talked briefly about a lot of the awards that you've won over the years. If there was one award that I would definitely put on my mantle, it would be the Fool Us Trophy. I remember watching you on Penn Teller Fool Us, and that's where you told the story of sharing a magic trick with a little blind girl. And then, of course, I held my breath, as I'm sure you did, as Teller walked up to you with his notebook. How was that experience for you to do Fool Us and to get a Fool Us Trophy?
Truly wonderful. Wonderful from start to finish. Totally unexpected. I hoped I would fool them. I mean, everybody who talks about going in saying like, well, you're not trying to fool them. You're just trying to get good footage. Well, let's be reasonable here. You are trying. I think you should go into. It's like saying, you go into a sports game. You're not trying to win. You're just trying to have a good time. Well, you can have a good time, but you really should go in trying to win. I hoped it would fool them, but I didn't. I didn't expect it to by any means. It was great. They were so gracious. Again, we talked about it with Lance Burton, but you got to give Penn and Teller their flowers. I mean, they certainly gain a lot from Fool Us, certainly, in every sense of that word. But it's a format that also gives a lot back to Magic, because look at the careers it's helped. Look at the magicians it was able to showcase. I mean, they really are improving the public's fluency of Magic. I would say most people that see Magic through screens are seeing some or most of it through Fool Us's 58 seasons that they've had up to this point. So that was a wonderful experience. And, that trick, I'm very proud of that trick. And yeah.
It definitely feels like nowadays Magic is kind of having a new renaissance because of Fool Us and, of course, other shows like America's Got Talent and Britain's Got Talent. How do you feel about now we're getting this new renaissance of new magicians coming forward?
Oh, it's always exciting. I mean, it's still a shift for me in my mind, and not an easy one always. I was so often the young guy. I was booked on conventions as like the representative of somebody under 40 or something. And now I'm not the young guy anymore. I'm the middle-aged guy. And there are all these other wonderful middle-aged guys that are my friends around me. And now there is a whole younger generation of really dynamic, wonderful performers. And I'm here for all of it. It's great.
Not only are you a great performer and lecturer and inventor, but you also have a very big appreciation for magic history. And I know that you also have a couple of interesting artifacts. You have Houdini's straitjacket. You even have Cardini's gloves, which blew my mind. Why do you believe, as a magician, it's very important to understand the history?
Oh, well, I mean, that's self-evident, right? I mean, part of my worldview in magic is that um, in a climate where everyone is talking about specializing, find some really, really tiny niche. I just feel like, why wouldn't you want to be the Renaissance person in magic? Why wouldn't you want to be able to perform for children and on stage and up close? I'm not saying you got to do it all or do it all for money, but like at times of my life, I've done children's shows and huge stage shows and halftime shows, and I've done close up and more walk around than I care to remember. And you've got to try it all. I think each one helps the other out. And part of that is understanding the history of this wonderful craft. I mean, it's not work. It's not like I feel like I have to be more well-rounded. It's fascinating. It's utterly, utterly fascinating. And the other wonderful thing about collecting, and I'm sad to say it's changing. I used to say this emphatically. I can't say it so strongly anymore. Is, let's say you and I were passionate about, I don't know, guitar music, playing guitar. We wouldn't be talking about how I have a signed Keith Richards guitar and a John Lennon guitar on my wall. That's museum stuff, right? But in magic, museum quality pieces are approachable. You can own this stuff. And especially the newer stuff with magicians who are still around, half the time it's just asking a colleague for it. I'll never forget, one of my favorite moments in magic is the 5 minutes that is the perfect act of Jan Frisch performing his FISM act. And I was with him backstage at a show we were working together, and he's got all these red balls that he hand sews that he does his act with. And I went, "Hey, can I have one of those?" And he goes, "Yeah, have this one." Like, I treasure
Wow.
that object, like, and you know what? I think you give that to anybody who asks. Like, I don't know, but that's not an expensive object I bought at auction. That was just like me walking up to a magician I really admired and just went, "Can I have that?" Sometimes it's just understanding the moment.
Whenever you look at Houdini's straitjacket in your home,
Yeah.
how do you feel knowing that you have something physical that was worn by, used by, and touched by one of the most iconic magicians of all time?
Oh yeah. A great great honor. And that's what it is. I mean, look, in this Marie Kondo era of minimalism and not wanting to own anything and asking if anything brings you joy, I am very comfortable saying I'm a maximalist. I love stuff. I love saving things. There's nothing that tickles me more than going through an old box and coming upon something that I didn't remember having or buying or collecting. And it's a wonderful feeling. Owning those objects brings me real joy. And, the Houdini stuff is very special.
I have a lot of friends who would not forgive me if I didn't take this opportunity to bring up Game of Thrones.
Yes. Um, what do you want to know about the sword illusion?
Yeah, if you could talk about how that happened. And also, you've also done some collaborations, not just for Game of Thrones, but other things like commercials and promotional materials. What is your process in creating magic that's not meant for you, but for other people to present, as in Game of Thrones?
Yeah. Well, that one came about in the era of Six Impossible Things. And it was I guess the producers of the segment, they came to the show and they said, hey, we want to do something interesting to unveil. I think it was season 2 or 3 of Game of Thrones, and then more largely other HBO shows. And it was the first time, or one of the first times, that they were promoting that you could watch these things on a tablet. The iPad was new at that time. And so they said, could you create some illusions from the tablet through the tablet for the shows? And one of the things they wanted to do was to pull a sword out of the tablet and have it catch fire. And it was wonderful. So I went to this soundstage and I had designed all these illusions and we put them all together, and it was some CGI and some practical illusion stuff. And it was really, really fun. And the whole time they were like, I'll change the name, but they were like, well, our boss, Rich, would have to approve that. Well, Rich has got to come in. Well, Rich has got to do this. Rich has got to do that. And like, who's this Rich guy? Well, you'll see. He's coming on Friday. And when Rich gets there on Friday, I realize it's my neighbor in my New York apartment. Like the guy who 16 million people live in New York City. And this is the guy who lives on my floor, 2 doors down from me. It was a truly magical moment to know that he was actually in charge of the segment and didn't know that I was in on it. It was just great.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Vanishing Ink. And when I talked to Andy, he mentioned that it was originally started because the two of you wanted to be able to market and package your magic your way. Could you talk about what Vanishing Ink has meant to you and Andy, and just how do you feel knowing that it's become one of the biggest online magic stores that now magicians all over the world flock to?
Yeah, it's a huge honor and a responsibility, and I think we're pretty sober in our view of the responsibilities that go with it, but also the opportunities that it affords us. And yeah, I'm super grateful that it's been embraced in this way. I can honestly say this, and again, you hate to speak in cliches, but when they're true, how else can you speak? Like, we started it because we wanted to create the magic shop that we wished existed. And to that point, there was really no magic shop on that scale run by performing magicians. And we wanted to do things differently. There are things that we can look back now and not really say are innovative, but at the time they were really innovative. Like, we almost always pair the books we release with video, and that was an innovation at the time. We have a full marketing department, like people who do nothing but market our magic. We have a full customer service team. That just didn't really exist 15 years ago in the way that it does now. I mean, the idea that you can write us 24 hours a day and ask about your package or ask for some help or ask if something's really that good as it looks, that's a kind of new advent to the landscape. And, we're proud of that. I think that my favorite part of Vanishing Ink, I love so many parts. Of course, I love the books. That's always close to my heart because I'm such a magic book junkie myself. But I think my favorite part are the events. We do 4 events a year. We do Magi Fest in the Session, 2 conventions in January, both of them in London and Columbus, Ohio. But we also do retreats. And this was an idea that I originally had based on yoga retreats. A girlfriend at the time was like, "Hey, let's go on a yoga retreat in Thailand." I was like, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, you sightsee and you explore Thailand, but then in the evenings you do yoga." And I was like, "That sounds great, except for the yoga part." And I thought, man, that would be so cool if we could do magic where you sightsee and go on luxurious adventure travel. And then in the evenings, when you're not sightseeing, you talk, walk, breathe magic. And so that's what we've done. So we're just getting ready to go to Mexico City. Um, and then Greece will be the next one. And we were just in Japan for one. And so, yeah, they go all over the place. And it's really, really fun.
Well, congratulations are definitely in order because thanks to Vanishing Ink, you and Andy were recently awarded the Literary Achievement Award by the Academy of Magical Arts.
Yeah, that was such an unexpected, sweet, sweet situation. I'm in awe of that.
Clearly, there is definitely a lot of love for Vanishing Ink. And I say that because one thing Andy and I also talked about when I spoke with him is, of course, what made really big news was the fire that happened at your Los Angeles warehouse. And there was this huge outpouring of love and support, and magicians just wanted to give, anything to help, any money to help you guys get back on your feet. How was it for you to feel this huge outpouring of love from the entire magic community?
Oh, just unbelievable. Really, really special. I can't put it into words. I mean, people were just we had so many people ask if we needed hands on the ground that they could just fly in and sweep up or start cataloging damage. Like, just unbelievable. Can you imagine that? Total strangers offering that?
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was just wonderful.
With all of these great achievements that you've been able to have, your TV appearances, stage shows, and travel shows all over the world, and all of these great things that you've been able to accomplish, I'm curious, Joshua, how do you manage to keep yourself humble in the midst of having all of this success and all of these awards?
Well, you're assuming I'm humble, my friend. We don't know each other that well. Um, you know, I I don't know. I mean, that's a tough question to answer. It's kind of a loaded question because I don't know if I am humble. I hope I am. I try to be. I work at it. I think very carefully about the word ego because I think most people get it totally wrong. They'll say so and so has an ego, so and so has an ego. Guess what? Newsflash. We all have egos. An ego is an absolutely essential part of having any personality whatsoever. A more, I think, accurate thing would be to say someone has a large ego or a small ego or an outsized ego or um, use those sorts of terms. But look, stepping on stage and performing magic in any way, shape, or form, there is an element of ego in it. There just is. There is an element of ego in saying to yourself, what I have to share is worth sharing and that I'm good, right? You need, that's at a minimum. I mean, can you imagine from there, the mindset goes crazy with some performers. I'm the best there ever was, but you need some form of ego. And also ego is a great asset if it's controlled. I mean, to say to yourself, which is what we all say when we're pushing the envelope, to say to yourself, I don't like cups and balls the way it's taught and the way I've seen everybody else do it. I think I can do better. I mean, that is a wonderfully healthy, ego-driven way to try and push the envelope to new heights. And it's what every single one of us say whenever we're innovating, right? Is I don't like the way something is. I don't like the way it looks when these other people do it. I can do better. That is a form of ego. And so, I try, of course, I strive to keep myself in check and learn from ways that maybe I'm not as humble as I should be. And there are humbling experiences and failures, but I always try to give myself a little bit of a pass that like ego called another thing is bravery. It's the ability to look at yourself and go, I can do this. I can succeed where others have failed or I've failed before. And I think that's what drives us to success sometimes.
How do you feel about the fact that you've also had the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of big names in magic, many of whom I'm assuming are also your heroes? How does that feel to know that you're able to stand shoulder to shoulder with some of today's greats?
Yeah, I mean that's it's just another perk of being in an industry that is tiny. I mean, how wonderful it is that, you know, if you work hard in this craft, you are going to come face to face with David Blaine and David Copperfield and Darren Brown, and you can't not. I mean, it's inevitable on your path that you would come face to face with those guys, and the fact that they're all accessible is so wonderful, and a great credit to them. Um, it's it's um it's a gift. Magic is this great gift. I'm so glad that it's not baseball or music or something else, that it's this perfect size that we can all be this tight knit community and share in these experiences as we hopefully push things further and leave it a little better than we found it.
Well, Joshua, here's my last question to you, my friend. What's the one piece of advice that has served you well that you'd want everyone else to hear?
Oh, whew. Yeah, that's a great question. I will definitely answer your question in the spirit you're asking. In in general terms, I'm not somebody who thinks that we're one tweet or one rule or one piece of advice away from, any kind of meaningful improvement. I think that like there are really no shortcuts to this game that we all play. But let me think. Um I mean, the thing that when I speak to young magicians that I always say is passion drives everything else. The hard truth is when I teach magic at a lecture or a youth conference or something, there's such a wide variety of skill levels. And sadly, there's such a wide variety of aptitude. It just comes easy to some people and it comes very hard to other people. There's some people that after 6 months, their sleight of hand is so smooth and so spot on, and other people who have been at it for 20 years and not for lack of trying, but it just looks inelegant and rough and like an uphill struggle, right? Aptitude is something we don't control. Some people can get in front of a group and sound as natural as I'm talking now, just to you. And some people, no matter how many decades they've been at it, they sound like a robot on stage. We just don't control the raw materials and the aptitude. The only thing we can control is the passion. And if the passion is there, if you get up and can't not do magic, coming back to what we talked about earlier, if it's an impulse for you, if it's a passion, something you can't live without, the rest takes care of itself. All those skills fall into place. The people who struggled in the beginning, when they have the passion, they find a way to break through it and get the help they need and get those skills sharpened. And it drives everything else. It makes you want to go further. It means that you never have to practice when it's not fun because the whole thing is fun for you. Passion drives everything else. And I try and tell people, like, look, it doesn't make you evil if you're not super passionate about magic. Something that you found fascinating as 8 years old does not mean it's still fascinating for you at 17 or 40 or 70. Like, things change. But when you don't have the spark and the passion anymore, that's trouble.
Absolutely amazing. Well, Joshua, this has been an absolutely fantastic time, and I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. And I wish you all the best in your life and your career, my friend.
Thank you very much. This is great that you're doing this, and I'm honored that you asked me to be part of it.
Passion drives everything. Whatever it is you're doing, never lose that passion. It makes what you're doing even more important. A very big thank you to Joshua J. for speaking to me today. He's truly an amazing man, and if you get a chance to see him in action, definitely take that chance. His show is one you won't want to miss. It's always a pleasure to share this time with you, my friends. I'm LD Madeira, wishing you all lots of love today, and remind you that you are who you are, and you are special. Don't forget to rate and review, and be sure to check out my website, ldmadeira.com. See you later on the next episode of Improv and Magic.